My guest today is performed on The Late Late Show with James Corden. Comedy Central, been featured on JFL New Faces. He's the host of the Downside podcast with Gianmarco Soresi. Excited to welcome Gianmarco Soresi.
Hello.
How you doing, buddy?
Oh, I'm good. I'm in Indianapolis. So this is I Googled what's fun to do in Indianapolis. They said record a podcast over Zoom is the most you're going to get. So this is close enough using River.
That's why they call it Naptown for a reason, bro.
Is that really what they call it?
Yeah. It's with athletes especially. They would always say like, yeah, we get in Indianapolis and we just go to sleep. Like there's nothing to do.
That's so funny. I know it's a pretty shitty place, or not for me, because I worked out yesterday and at 3 p.m. I could not get a smoothie anywhere. I could not find a smoothie in all of Indianapolis. And they said there was one in the mall, and I went to this mall. I mean, they should shoot zombie movies in this mall. It looks so empty. Everything was closed.
I know exactly what mall you're talking about.
And then I went to the one place that Google Maps said there was a smoothie. I walk in, it looks like it's open, but it looks, no screens are working. I thought, I don't think it's open. And I said, hello? And this, 14-year-old breaking the law working at the smoothie place comes out. I say, hi, do you have smoothies here? And she said, we do, but... And then she pretended to look like in an empty bucket. We have no fruit today. And I was like, what the fuck? No fruit? Then close. Tell Google Maps not to tell me to walk here. It was very sad. And
yeah, what? That's kind of like,
yeah,
that's like one of two things you have to have for a smoothie bar.
It's just I grew up. I was kind of a mall rat as a kid, and I remember whenever I'm in a mall space. Again, my mall as a kid was better than this piece of shit. But there's something that feels cold to me. I don't feel warmth in a mall. It feels really like it's too clean. You smell the aerosol spray. It's cold. It's chilly. There's a bunch of stores, but you don't really want to go to any of them. And it's just a bad feeling. I'm not a mall guy anymore. I don't like it.
Oh, I mean, it's the culture's changed completely. When we were growing up, like I'm 34, like
me too.
That's where you went. Like Friday night, your parents would drop you off, and you just hang out there. And like, I don't know, we started smoking weed pretty early, but like that was where you like,
yeah.
That's where you talk to girls and like, first kiss or other things. It just was it was an important place to be.
We had a food court. I mean, I think this speaks to just like society's lost a kind of magic with this food court in the center. There was like a clay chef, like on the hour. He'd pop out and be like, whoa, it's so full today. I'm going to go make it a meatball. And then would lower back into the thing. Just like kind of like Chuck E. Cheese, like a robotics thing. And it was so fun. And malls don't have that character anymore. It's just empty. It's just an empty food court. In fact, the chairs are bolted to the floor because people were stealing too many of them. It's an awful place.
Yeah. At yesterday's mall?
Yes, yesterday's mall. Terrible mall. Bolted, chained. There was just a security guard. He was ready to shoot anyone who tried picking up this chair. It was awful.
It's crazy. Well, dude, before we get into it, if you watch us on YouTube, make sure to hit that like button, share the podcast, subscribe, hit the notifications bell so you don't miss our content. And then we are on Patreon, patreon.com/FNFpod. Thank you for coming on today, dude. We worked together, just for context, at Last Comedy Club in Seattle. Had a bunch of really good shows there. And
good shows.
You were like on it that weekend, man. I mean, I think, Saturday you did almost an hour and a half. And just, I've never seen anybody work that hard over the course of a weekend. It was impressive, but...
Yeah. I'm getting tired. I'm getting tired of. Sometimes I'm like, God, what am I doing? Every night, an hour and a half, and then I got to listen back to it. I'm going to go crazy. Now that I've been on the road long enough to understand why some successful comedians kill themselves. I'm fine, but I go like, oh yeah, I see it. I see it. Another hotel room, all alone. I see it.
Yeah, it's insane that like the trajectory is you start around a bunch of your peers and you have this like community, and then when you actually go off on your own, you're by yourself so much. And like I was thinking about it. I flew to La Jolla yesterday, and I'm like, I can't imagine what some of you guys doing this every weekend, like just the actual logistics of like getting in the car and going to the airport and going through the line and you know trying to manage social media and do all these things. Like that's a crazy, like when do you even have time to have fun at this point?
Yeah, yeah. Trying to find that balance.
Yeah, just drugs like that. I think that's what it ends up being for a lot of people. It's like they have to like do something to put them outside of that situation mentally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know, man. It's not a healthy life. Not a healthy life.
It no, it's well your trajectory, or how you came up. You studied acting at University of Miami.
Yeah, I was a musical theater major, and I wanted to be a Broadway guy. I mean, my fantasies when I was like a kid, I wanted to be in Broadway shows, Broadway musicals. I wanted to be like an amazing singer, and I practiced the way I practiced comedy. I mean, it was. I look back and I regret it, but I spent most of college waking up early. I would go to a practice room. I would do scales, and I thought that I would be able to become this astounding. Like in my mind, I had delusions of grandeur. Like I thought I could sing to the level of Pavarotti, but do musical theater, and I practiced with that intensity. And then I think literally after 4 years of doing it and having, only getting a little bit better, I think I finally like hit a wall. It wasn't a decision, but I just stopped practicing. I burnt out. And I think it was because I don't think I had the voice. I don't think I had the instrument. And when you like enter the professional world of singing, if you don't have the instrument, it's really apparent really quickly that you can't do this professionally.
Don't you ever see people like that in stand up? Because I was a musician. I played drums and I also play basketball. I just like I love doing both those things. And I've heard Bill Burr say this actually, where he's a drummer and like he just knew that he never had it. Like he loved to play drums, but he didn't have that thing. Whereas like with stand up, I never felt like it was like it didn't feel necessarily hard. Like it felt like I could work at it and get better, and I had some baseline natural ability for it. Like I've sucked at everything else in my life.
Yeah. I think the thing with something like stand up though is like even if you're not the best, you can occasionally create works of art that are really good. Like I know comedians who aren't successful that have like a bit that you go like, fuck, that's beautiful, that's perfect, or what a unique thought. Like it's as opposed to if you are pursuing professional basketball and you suck, there's not like one game where you beat LeBron. It never happens. It never happens.
The closest thing is like doing well in the slam dunk contest. That's the close, like just like a guy that he can fucking throw down the ball, but if you put him in a game, he's terrible.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, I basically I was singing and then I did acting and I kind of had that same level of intensity with acting. And again, I don't think I had a supernatural talent. And also, I think I realized I like wanted to be like Daniel Day Lewis. I wanted to be like a dramatic actor. I love Philip Seymour Hoffman. I love Daniel Day Lewis. And then I thought about what it really entailed to, for example, I saw Philip Seymour Hoffman in Death of a Salesman. And I'm like, every night he has to go to this dark, fucked up place. I don't want to do that. I don't want.
It's almost like you would need to take heroin to do that, right?
Well, sure, that's part of it.
Actually, yeah.
You're like, I think you lived in this darker space. when something really bad happens to me, if I'm going through like a breakup or a real low point, in that moment, I'm like, oh yeah, I would love to perform Death of a Salesman right now.
Yeah, yeah.
For all heroin users, but that they're able to live in that place or in a way that to me is like it's not natural. It feels awful, and basically pursued acting until I wrote a play with a lot of like talking to the audience, and again, it was like that was the moment where that people were responding to that, and I was like, oh, I think I'm kind of good at this, and then I became a stand-up.
Yeah, and where did you cut your teeth?
I cut my teeth at a dreadful comedy club called LOL. And I will tell you that, as stupid as it sounds, publicly talking shit about that club to me felt like a real sign that my career had grown.
They it was one of those like historical like kind of bringer clubs.
Not even bringer. No, no one really brought. It was just they hired street teams to go into Times Square and just scoop up people who didn't have plans, families who were like, oh, we didn't get tickets to the Lion King, let's go to this. And then it's like they would have like a family show for the first one, and then the other shows would be dirty, fun, but some hacky, some good, but overall just like a brutal experience. Like music blaring, drinks terrible, grungy, horrible bathrooms with wet floors. And the green room, when we even had one, was like a closet. Just brutal. And I wasn't paid for pretty much a year. I just did check spots. Uh, and it it made me like a much stronger comedian. I felt like I learned how to write good jokes outside of that club, but I got stage time. I got to deal with tough crowds. I had to follow guys who would just murder, perform for diverse crowds, crowds that didn't speak English, family friendly shows. So it was just one of the few places I feel like today, even in America, where a stand up comedian can get that much time every day at one place. I think that's really hard to do given how many stand up comedians are in the world today.
Oh, for sure. How many spots were you doing a night?
I feel like there was a time where I was doing 4 a night most days of the week, at least 6, if not every day of the week, and unpaid for a long time. I mean, on Fridays and Saturdays, I do 5, and the last show would start at like fucking 1 a.m. 1 a.m. And I would go up at like 2:20 for the worst crowd you've ever seen in your entire life. Um, and I think it really catapulted me into being at least a functional stand-up comedian, if not a great one. Like I could perform anywhere, I could follow anything, and I had jokes that even if they were fine, were crowd pleasers and would get a pop.
Yeah. Was there any downside to just doing that particular room so much?
Yes, I think the biggest downside was just like not interacting with people in my quote unquote class, and not hanging around clubs, even if I didn't have spots, so I could eventually get in there sooner. There's a lot of clubs in the city where you got to like be part of their social thing, and instead I was kind of with 6 comics every night, doing the grind at a club no one respected. Uh, so it's a give and take, and it took a long time, I think, especially since I kind of, because of this club, skipped a lot of the open mic world. I think because I had stage experience, and I would write jokes kind of like a playwright does outside of open mics. I think that I skipped the open mic phase, which the downside was I didn't like come up with a group of people who I saw every day and they became my community. And it took a long time for me to feel like I had more of a community. And I still feel like there's something a little bit missing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I had a similar thing happen because Laughs was my home club or is my home club, and like when I started, I just got up there every weekend. They threw me a ton of stage time, and it was great. But like over time, I've actually had to go back to doing more mics, and just like I when you're on an island like that, it just doesn't feel very good. Like you're it's I think comedy is better when you can bounce ideas off of people and like people that you trust and respect, and it's hard to do that without like it's dude, it's so humbling to like go into this terrible bar that nobody wants to hear what you have to say, and like just yeah, but then at the same time it's sort of like this is the deal. Like it's you got to have something twisted in you to even want to do any of this to begin with. So, why did you want to do stand up? What did you have a favorite comic?
I liked comedy growing up, but not like in a I didn't like I just knew the basics. I mean, when I was in high school, I mean, we're the same age. It was Dane Cook was huge, and then Chappelle. And for me, that's what stand-up comedy was for me when I was in high school. It was Chappelle's show and Dane Cook, and I saw the first season of Last Comic Standing, and I know I wasn't a real comedian because I thought Dat Fan should have won as he did. And I feel like if you were a real comedian, you were like, obviously Ralphie May should have won. So I liked it enough. I liked comedy. I like South Park and whatnot. But no, I think I got into comedy. I don't think I really understood it until I tried when I was older, when I was 27 or 26, where I realized that I like the constant feedback. I think I crave that validation. And I like if I were to write, when I try to write other things like a short story or a kid's book or a play, I want constant feedback. Like I want to hear it said out loud. I want to hear it said out loud and hear how people laugh. And like their laugh really helps me craft. I like that's one of the tools that I really need to activate my imagination. And with stand up, it was like, oh wow, I can craft things with this constant feedback every night. I can go somewhere 4 times a night and feel like, oh, now I know how to make this thing. Otherwise, it feels like I'm making it in a vacuum. So I think stand up, it was less even about like loving the comedy. It was more like, oh, this is the most fun way it is for me to create something.
Yeah. Can I push back on something?
Sure.
So, one thing that I'm not like challenging
No, no, please, please.
over time that I've kind of realized through my own process is like if you do that with just like you and the audience, and it's that constantly back and forth and checking and adjusting and tweaking and stuff, like there's a lot that ends up uh like you're at high risk for falling into hack is my opinion.
Sure, sure.
Like having people like I don't know how many headliners I've talked to where they're like I went to wherever and I got this uh amazing 3 to 5 minutes that was crushing, and then I took it back to the city and it just ate shit. And to me it's like when you're not around other comics that are holding you to those standards, and then people, I think what it boils down to is like, do you respect your peers opinions enough to have them check you, and it forces you to hold yourself to a higher standard.
Yeah, but it's hard to check. I mean, I totally hear what you're saying. And I think like part of it, part of like not being a hack, it's your own, it's your own challenging of yourself. I think I know when something it's very rare that I think comedians talk to each other uh, at that level, especially when you get older and you start being like, well, how do I make a living? Where sometimes I'm amazed comedians I respect who are really good friends with comedians who I think are like fucking bullshit. And I think it's because life becomes about family and providing. So I think at the end of the day, the only person that can stop you from being a hack is yourself. And
Really?
because I think you get to an age and you get to friendships where for me to go up to a comedian and say, "Hey, just so you know, that joke is hacky," they would have to come to me and say, "Hey, will you please be honest with me? Is this joke hacky?" I think it's tough, dude. I think it's really fucking tough because I think a lot of older comedians ultimately become hacky. I think when I have questions sometimes, I'll ask my girlfriend, who I think has really good taste. Um, but the only time a comedian's ever fully checked me was I had a joke where it was like it basically it was a joke about my girlfriend said this thing, then she said this other thing, and then the third beat was, "I'm just kidding, I don't have a girlfriend." And a comedian named Paul Mercurio said to me, he said, "You're better than that joke," and it rocked my world. Because not the whole joke, just that last part. And I think the reason, though, if I'm holding myself accountable for future things, is that joke is an evolution of the not joke, and that's hacky. Because the joke is, hey, this thing, no, oh, I have a girlfriend. I'm just kidding. I don't have a girlfriend, and that's why it's hacky. And I think, like for me, that's like a principle that I've installed in myself. Where if I have a joke where the joke part is that I lied, then now I challenge myself to be like, nope, that's hacky. You gotta develop your own sense of taste. And you should take other people's taste and listen to them and have your advisors and the people you go to for advice. But I think the most important part is your own ability to smell your own shit and go, that stinks.
Yeah, the other side of it, and it's easy to be like kind of the hack police or whatever, where you're like going around telling, picking apart other people's stuff. Like when you're working and the job is to kill, like there's an expectation there to kill, and it's a lot of pressure. And so like when somebody comes to you and is like, "You're better than that joke," there's somewhere in you where you're like, "Dude, I put the time in to make that thing, and I have relied on that thing, and it's served me." And I do think like just over time you should hold yourself to like higher and higher standards. But like there is a culture of just being a dick about it too, where it's like I sometimes I'm like, you know, I think people just like ripping apart other people's shit, and they try to find the one thing wrong with it, and it's I don't know. It's hard. I just in general though, I think it takes a certain level of ego to get up there, and the more you can kind of diffuse your ego and take yourself out of like disconnect yourself from the material, that will make your comedy better, because it's like it's it when you're tied to your jokes from a place of like I need these rather than like this is something I created, it's it's a completely different mentality. And I was thinking about this last night, like who does Chappelle check jokes with? Like Donnell?
I mean, and then it's just a question of I have some comedians who like I ask them for advice, and I just think it takes a specific kind of person to be like, no. Sometimes I have to remind myself that a lot of these comedians that I talk to, they don't they're worried about bothering me or being negative, and so am I with them. I have to be really close to someone. I have dear friends. I have dear friends that I want to sometimes give them like a note. And they maybe I'm wrong, but there's some people you know really well and you're like, "I think you do this thing that you'd be so much better if you broke this habit." But it's hard. It's hard. Not everyone wants to hear it. Not everyone wants to hear it.
I think the people that do tend to be really fucking good comics though. Like I envy those people where they can take any feedback, and it's a hard thing to do, especially when I don't so much of your livelihood feels tied to that. But I wanted to ask, like, you're probably the hardest working comic I've met. Like I've worked with a lot of people, and where do you think that motivation comes from?
I I think like some of it's just, I wanted to be this great singer. I wanted to be this great actor. I think there's something to me about earning my existential keep, like wanting to feel like I'm making something of worth in the universe, which in my cynical modes I go, well, there's no such thing as meaning in the universe. But I think like the romantic side of me is like, oh, I want that. I want to pursue that. I want to feel that. I want to feel like I'm making good work. And then I think another part, I mean, I think they're all psychologically like, problematic or poisonous, but are also just part of my DNA. I think I like feeling respected. I like feeling talented. I like feeling like I made people's nights. I think I've been in some terrible funks, and if I have a good set, it's like a reboot to my whole system.
Yeah. I was having that like 2 nights ago. I did this, dude. I did this casino gig, and it was like the sound wasn't going, and like just the worst. There was a bowling alley in the background just going, and I'm like, I called my buddy. I'm like, yeah, I think I'm done. I think this is the night where like I'm just. And I flew down here to La Jolla and did 2 shows last night. It was so much fun. You're like, I'm back in on this. This life's for me, and it just it's so brutal.
I don't think men stand up. There's this thing of like our stand up comedian is more fucked up than other people. I think what the truth of it is that there's some people who really love the dopamine rush and the rush of validation from stand up comedy, and the people who really love it because they feel real sad outside of it. And I think that's what keeps a lot of people going. It's not what makes them funnier. It's not what makes them funnier, but if they are sad and depressed, then they love that high so much they're willing to pursue this very thankless career and go through all the awful, awful, awful moments of it because that high means so much to them. So at the end of the day, you have more stand up comedians who are depressed than not.
Just incredible drug addicts. That's what we are. It's just like it's I guess for me it's changed a little bit, and I don't know. I quit my day job in January, and I've dealt with like this issue of like burnout quite a bit, and I wanted to ask you about it. Is like, do you feel funny very often? Because like for a period of time, I wasn't at all.
Yeah, it's a mix. It's such a mix. I There's some shows, I mean, where I'm like, God, I do not feel amusing. I feel grumpy. I feel a little off. I'm tired. And everyone comes to the club with this energy. I think there's a real, it's kind of a new anxiety. Again, I'm not selling out everywhere I go, but like, for example, I went to Boston and I sold it out. It was a one nighter on a Sunday, and I think it was like 240 people. And I wasn't in a great mood. I took a train. I just was fine. It was just a Sunday. I felt whatever. And I show up and I'm like, oh my God, there are 240 people here on a work night. They have work in the morning. And like they're here to see me and I don't feel it tonight. And oh my God, 240 people, I tricked them into spending money and taking time off. And I'm about to deliver like a mediocre show. I don't even want to be here. And I think it's a weird feeling. It's a weird. And luckily, once I go out there and I get that first pop, it's like the engine starts running. And but it's an anxiety. It's an anxiety I have to deal with, like not letting it get high. This anxiety of like, oh, I'm about to really bum out. I'm about to watch 240 people realize they made a mistake in liking who I am.
Well, I actually heard Ian Bagg talking about something similar to where he, at a certain point in his career, he realized that he needed to like do his pre-show stuff differently because he would watch his openers and he would see one of them do something that he didn't like and it would put him in a mood, and then he would see somebody being super dirty and it would frustrate him, and so he'd kind of he would get pissed, right? And then it would put him in a headspace that wasn't good for his personal set. So what he started doing was just not watching openers, and when he walks on stage, even if he's not in the right headspace, he says like five things that he's grateful for as he's going up there, and by the time he hits the mic, it kicks in and he's good.
That's really funny because I don't know Ian Bag's work that well, but like he can be dark and mean, and the idea of him like saying some blessings is very funny. It's fascinating. I don't I feel like I wouldn't be able to.
I've worked with him two different weekends or three different weekends. He is one of the best comedians I've ever seen. Like his
I gotta go. I gotta go listen then. Yeah,
it's he's I think he's I've worked with Big J a lot and I've worked with Ian a lot. I both of them, their crowd work is on such a different level. There's no blocking, there's no like it's 100% in the moment authentic crowd work, and the way that they can work like do callbacks within the crowd work and just the layers of it and bringing people together. Harlan Williams, Big J, and fucking Ian Bagg are all insane. Like if you ever get a chance to watch them, you will lose your mind. It the best way I can describe Ian Bagg is like it. All you see is the blood splatter on the wall behind him because he's so fast that he does the punchline, and then you're like you don't even know what hit you. There's this murder that just happened. It's crazy.
what I wish I could see because like I do more crowd work than I used to, and I'm certainly motivated to do it so I can get clips. Um, but when it's like a tough show, I feel like I am the worst crowd worker that's ever lived. I still have shows where I go like, "Oh my God, I should never talk to the audience again. I did nothing." And part of it is like, sure, I might not have been on game, but also some audiences like they're not hot enough to trigger what makes it all work. And so there's no laughter to help you know where to go. Like sometimes crowd work for me, it's like you're I don't know if I can think of a metaphor exactly in time, but you don't know where the funny's going to be. So you're blind and you're like a bat, and your only real signal of where to go, left or right, is people laughing. And if it's not a live enough crowd that you get to hear like the little laughters and the little titters, you're blind. You don't know where the next big punchline is. You don't know what they find funny. And I would love to see like people who are like legendary crowd works like Ian Bagg, like like I want to see him with a dud of an audience, like a not sold out small helium room, and to be like, "Ooh, let me see him do it here."
Dude, I I saw him do I think 90 minutes for a show like that. If you wanna actually do yourself like a favor, watch or listen to the Hot Breath episode with Ian Bagg. He talks about when he was doing JFL with Dane Cook. They did like a JFL Canadian tour, and he had to follow Dane Cook when Dane Cook was Dane Cook. Like he was just eating his fucking ass every time. Like he's like I was just dying. But he talks about crowd work and his approach to crowd work and why what he does differently. And he I don't want to spoil it for anybody. Check out that episode. It's incredible. It's very very simple, and it makes complete sense. But I his mentality is like there are crowd work comedians and there are not. And if you're not the type of person that is intrigued by what somebody is doing or appears to be thinking or feeling in the audience, don't go into it. Like, if you don't give a shit, don't try and have a conversation. You wouldn't do that normally. Why would you just look at somebody and start a conversation with somebody you don't give a shit about at all? And it shows so much in the actual application. But check it out. And let me know once you listen to it. But you did mention something about clips. And before we get into the story segment, because I want to respect your time, but you've had a lot of success on social, and like, how has it helped you? And like, what are your opinions on it and its role in comedy moving forward?
I enjoy it. I think all social media is inherently designed to play off the same things that are triggered by gambling and slot machines and are like it's companies poisoning your mind. I also have ADD and I enjoy the constant stimulus. So I think I recognize it as a reality of succeeding in this industry. I was a because I was an actor for so long, I really experienced what it's like to trust the system, whether that be agents or comedy clubs that think you're really good and that's why they accept you. And I did not succeed in that system. That system is no longer designed to win or for me to win. So I got to do this, and I have to make content. I mean, this is similar to the conversation we had about Hack, but it's like, are you still putting out good? Are you still putting out good work? I've released some crowd work clips that like I could see a comedian being like, wasn't quite a lot there, not quite enough there to be posting that. I think, but and you'll see some comedians who go viral and you go like they suck or they have a big I have all the problems everyone does with social media, um, but it's a reality. I try to enjoy it. I like editing my some most of my crowd work clips. I like the process of what cut could I make, what could I move, how do I turn this 3 minutes into like 30 seconds with a good hook and a good pop. I see it, I try to enjoy the artistic journey of that as well. Um,
What kind of launched you to getting to headliner though? Was social like the thing that was your jumping off point?
I think because of COVID, like everyone, COVID changed whatever the trajectory was. Because I kind of went into COVID not a headliner. Maybe I don't think I'd ever even done a full weekend at a club, and then got big on TikTok. I think it just helped my agent pitch me to clubs. So I think the only headlining I'd done was at Mohegan Sun, which was a casino, and that's because I won a competition. And I think like
That's right. You told me that.
I came out of COVID and I had a special I had released on Amazon, which doesn't mean anything. Amazon did not produce it. But I think like that mixed with a big TikTok and a bigger Instagram, it just, started rolling. And I was lucky getting a touring agent at that level is not easy, but I kind of was grandfathered in because I was with this agency as an actor. And my agent, Matt Bourne, worked really, really hard for me because there's not a lot of agents dealing with some of these clubs because the money they get is nothing. It's nothing. If they give me a headlining weekend at Nick's Comedy Stop, that's $200 a night. That means they're getting $40. That's not how their business is run. It's not worth their time to get gigs. But Matt was incredible, and then it just it rolled. It rolled and rolled.
But you need that. You need those weekends so that you can work that hour, so that you can put together an hour of material that is marketable and sellable to those major platforms. Like, there's not. That's
The ability to like sell to these platforms, even that feels like dead to me to a certain degree. It's like, you could sell a special to Netflix at this point, but it's like who do they buy specials off? Sam Morril. Like it's the people they're doing that with are fucking huge. They're fucking huge. So once again, it's like I'm just putting it out there on my own. I I I think that's partly my experience with the comedy, but I think just after a long acting career where I was so dependent on random people thinking of me when they saw a breakdown, and that I just said, fuck it. I remember thinking to myself, like, do I want to be one of these like do it yourself people constantly producing? Because it also that's how a lot of people start sucking because they have to do so much other work. They have to do partly what I do and what I struggle with, which is like I got to edit, I got to listen back, I got to cut, I got to do a podcast, and ultimately I said yes, that's what I'm going to have to do, and I could be a whiny little bitch about it and become older and older and go like, why didn't it happen for me? This person sucks, or I can be like, this is just the world you live in.
Yeah. It sucks though. It sucks so much. Like I don't really understand how you don't lose your sense of humor throughout that process. It's so hard. Like you're everything you're doing is not you personally, but just like that problem to solve. It's all of them are serious things, and it's like the last thing a comedian wants to deal with. And I do think there's a certain balance point where you're like, you do too much of that stuff, and it just sucks the comedy away from you. Like this past year especially, I'm like, yeah, I'm not. There are certain things that I'm willing to say no to because it's gonna make me less funny. Like I'm okay with certain lacks of success because it's like the at the end of the day, the kernel of what you're working with is your sense of humor, and if you don't have that, you got nothing. Like it's it's what you're selling.
So again, you could make a podcast that like will sell and be marketable, or you can make a podcast that you're like, this is fun for me. So it's like figuring out how to do those workaholic things. And believe you me, I'm trying to, as I make more money, to hire people to help. But like I also my podcast, for all that it's worth work, all the work I have to do for it, it's what I love. I love talking about the downsides, and I push myself to have interviews that I would enjoy. And so it's like make the work serve the art.
For sure. Well, speaking of that, we have a segment on here, a story time segment. I asked you to bring on a story. Um, if I can get you to share one, and then we'll wrap things up after that.
I'll do a change. I'll do this. This is a stand up gig one.
It's story time. It's story time with Adam. Yeah, it's story time. It's story time with Adam and friends.
I'm sure people could guess from me talking this whole episode, I'm a very liberal, leftist boy, and I got a corporate gig from my agent featuring at a casino in I think Santa Barbara, and I was featuring. I was doing 25. They said 25 clean, which I could do, and it was 3,500. 3,500 for, and I think it was probably on like a Sunday too, so I didn't have to miss any headlining. So I had my mom who lives in LA. She drove me, and we were going to stay the night. It was like a bonding, a degree of a bonding thing. I was like, cool. My mom, she's invested. It was very nice of her to do it. And I went to. I didn't prep a lot because I'm featuring. If I was headlining, I would have done a little more prep. But on the car ride there, I looked up this company, and I think it was called Collab, COLAB, and that was an acronym for something. And it was like an electricians union something or other. That's all I knew. So I pulled up a newsletter from their website. I couldn't really understand what the company was. Like I didn't really. It was hard to make jokes of. So I was like, let me do some more investigating. And the newsletter, one of the first headlines for the newsletter was like, COVID, climate change, and other lies Democrats want you to believe. And is wokeness destroying America? And our 10 least favorite Jews. And I was like, oh no, this is a very, very conservative place. And in my mind, I mean, for me to turn around and not do this gig, not just to not do it, but it was the day of. I'd be putting my agent in a bad position. I'd be making him look like a schmuck to do it day of. But I'm going there and I feel uncomfortable. I'm like, oh no. I'm worried, like, what if I go there and Alex Jones is the guest speaker? Like what if I go there? How bad are we talking here? And we're talking bad. I get there and it's a banquet hall. It's packed. It's 800 people. I swear to God, they're all dressed like cowboys. They're all dressed like cowboys, and they're old and they're white and they're orange in the way that Trump is orange. Like they saw Trump and they said, "I want to be him." Like very stands. They were stands, and I'm looking around. I'm feeling weird. They have a country band playing on stage to prep for the show. And I look at the playbill, I get ready, I meet the headliner. And the headliner was a black guy, and he was the only black guy in this entire, it felt weird. And I'm sure I was the only Jew in the room, me and my mom. But she's able to hide better because, she got a nose job. But I'm there. They know I'm Jewish. And they open the show with a singing of the national anthem. And I go, oh my God. And they're standing, the Pledge of Allegiance. And like, even, I don't even do that stuff, but I'm like, I'm doing it here.
Yeah, you better do it.
And they're really nice to me. And I look down at the playbill, and it says, national anthem. They have an auction, and the auction was all guns. The auction was an auction for big guns, Glock 19s, AR-15s. Then they were auctioning like training seminars with a real Navy SEAL. Well, you and your whole family, and pictures of kids with guns bigger than them. Like, thank you, Merry Christmas, and
just armor-piercing rounds.
And if that wasn't the worst part, I looked down, and it's underneath all the chorus sponsored by Marlboro cigarettes, and the auction sponsor, and then it gets to the comedians. Gianmarco Soresi sponsored by ExxonMobil. I am being sponsored by ExxonMobil, and I have this idea in my head. I'm like, oh, you know what will absolve me morally is to tell a joke where I make fun of them a little. I'm not a comedian. I'm going to go up there and be like, you know what the problem with America is? You motherfuckers. Fuck everything. I'm not that. But in my head, I'm like, can I do a joke where I'm not disgusted with myself? I feel disgusted with myself. I say I'm a bad person. I'm a liar. All my beliefs. I'm too cowardly to stand up. So I have but then I have this idea for a joke, and I'll tell you what it is in a second. But I tell my mom the joke, and this is the moral backbone I come from. My mom's like, do not tell that joke. She's like, baby. She's like, Gianmarco, you don't have to make a fuss. You don't have to cause a scene. Just let's be nice. And I'm like, this is where my moral failings come from. It's you. You have conditioned me to be polite and nice. And that is the problem with the world. It's liberals like us. And I go up there. I'm really debating in my head. Do I do this? Do I not? Do I do this? Do I not? I do this set. And by the way, just to set it up, there's banners of all the companies that are sponsoring this event. Again, like, this gun company and this anti-woke coffee store. And in the back, there is a flag that says ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil. And so I go up there, and I had this joke at the time about there's this billionaire recreating the Titanic. is a real thing. It's called Titanic 2, and it's going to go along the exact same route as the original because global warming made it safer. And that's how I started the joke before I got into all the other things. But this time, I went up there and I said, it's going along the exact same route as the original because the icebergs got a lot smaller thanks to my sponsor, ExxonMobil. And and I have the recording of it. They first not quite a laugh, but it went like a big oh, and I said oh, they're laughing, and then this noise, which was just noise, just like people going oh, and then I heard the first b, I heard the first b, and the turned into boo. I've never I've never been in situations like I performed in Harlem, but I never like performed at the Apollo. I never performed in a space where I've never been booed. And even this boo, it was the same way that like if you say go Cowboys and they're some other football team, I'd be like boo. It's not fully we're going to hang you after the show, but it's not fun. They don't like you a little, and I felt it, and I I was so proud of myself. I really was. This is not like a good trait. I'm really proud of myself. In that moment, I was like, good for you. And I don't think I know for a fact. Like the headliner had been booked at this gig like 6 years in a row, and I knew talking to the people after, I saw their demeanor change. I don't know if it was fully that joke, or I also did not have like a killer set leading up to it. I got in my head, not just because of the clean, but because it was like all older white people, conservative, that I thought, like, I think I got in my head about, oh, they're not going to like this. They're not going to like that. Oh, this is too dirty.
Yeah, and when they started booing, it's like they just showed you how much they love guns. Like there's such a different thread of like there's certain rooms where you do that and you're like, this just got very dangerous for me. And it's
It's hard. I can't imagine. I when I think about when I have to headline around the country and in certain places that are very conservative, I always try to be cognizant of the fact that I'm a straight white man, and I think about if it took courage for me to do this in this room, the chutzpah it takes to be a queer comedian in Hoover, Alabama. It takes fucking because just their existence is brave, let alone me doing one joke. Them talking about having a same sex partner is an act of courage. And I just try to remember, and I think sometimes edgy comedians or comedians like me who like being like a little like, ooh, what did I just say? We have to remember that like our version of edgy is in fact way safer than the spaces comedians who are not straight or white or a man have to perform in all
no,
the
they're
time.
not even trying to be edgy. They're just being them.
Just being them. And it's important to keep in mind. In a way, not a way of like, oh, well then I can't. It's just to understand it, to appreciate it, and understand that some squeaky clean gay comedian performing in Alabama is braver than me telling a joke about being anti-Catholic church in a Catholic area. Like they're more brave, and it's important to just remember that. It's just to be cognizant.
Definitely. Well, dude, thank you. That was a great story. Love. I mean, I've been doing a lot of red rooms like that in Oregon, and I actually really enjoy seeing different types of audiences and figuring out like the craft of like just doing you in those environments, like not really bending and figuring out how to make it work. But it's really hard, and it's easy to fall into sacrificing your own perspective to meet those needs. So it's like,
I have jokes that like touch on trans rights, and they're very at their core pro trans rights jokes. And sometimes I'll be in these spaces like Hoover, Alabama, where I'm like, I know even if this is a good joke, it's not gonna. It's the audience is gonna be weird about it because they are
of
not
course,
pro trans rights,
they've
or a
literally
majority of them
never
are.
met a trans person.
And they've never been a trans person. And there's like, I say to myself, like, no, this is the place where it's where you need to say something that is funny and pro-trans, because in these people, that's the first time they're going to hear something about a trans person, not from fucking Tucker Carlson, and they can go, oh yeah, that is a funny thing, or oh yeah, it is silly to care about this thing, this about bathrooms. And it's like that's the place where you can actually do something with your comedy. You're not going to move mountains, but maybe two people are on the fence and they're about to be pro-trans, and you shook them a little onto the right side of the fence.
For sure. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on. Is there where can people find your stuff, and is there anything you want to plug?
Sure, listen to my podcast, The Downside. I love doing it. And then, I'm always touring around the country. Just find me everywhere at my name, Gianmarco Soresi.
Dude, thank you so much for coming on. And thanks, everybody, for listening. If you enjoyed the episode and you're watching us on YouTube, hit that like button. Share it with a friend. Sorry if we had any technical difficulties with this episode. There were a couple moments where my internet went in and out, but if you stayed with us, thank you. Throw in a comment or question for myself or Gianmarco, and then if you can, support us on Patreon, patreon.com/FNFpod, and we're also always on Instagram at FNFpod. We're going to leave you guys with Jaga.
I just make the waves, I don't write them. I can hear the lyrics in my spirit as I write them. Why you wanna walk and talk just like them? I can't get caught up in all the hype and the excitement. I just make the waves, I don't write them. I can hear the lyrics in my spirit as I write them. Why you wanna walk and talk just like them? I can't get caught up in all the hype and the excitement. Welcome to my wave pool, my wave pool. 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 Welcome to my wave pool.